prepare during the RPA life cycle. And we'll also see what the best practices we should involve during building of this documentation or during the building of the RPA, workflow. So having said that, let's quickly start with my introduction. Okay, so I'm Satish. I am total having 10 years of experience, ranging from different domains of IT, working in data analytics, data warehouse, ETL, and robotics process automation. I have total in RPA 5+ years of experience. Currently working as a solution architect for one of the leading IT MNC in Delhi NCR. I also participate in a lot of UiPath community events, and probably if you follow me on the LinkedIn, the link is given on the slide. So you will see all my contributions to the UiPath community. And I also own a blog which is called rpabotsworld.com, which is basically a blog dedicated for the RPA tools. And there I publish a lot of useful documentation and step-by-step guide for a different use cases. So keep following me over there as well. Right. So let's talk about agenda, what we are going to cover today and what should be the outcome of the today's session. All right. So we'll be discussing first about the process automation lifecycle. In particular, we'll see how it is different from software development lifecycle. Is it same or is it different from the software development lifecycle we do for building a software, right? What are the methods that we follow for designing and documenting the document for the process automations? We'll see what is a PDD, how we should be able to generate the PDD, what are the tools that are used. In particular, we'll be working with a task capture tool, which is given by the UiPath to help you creating a PDD in a few minutes, right? And we'll also see a lot of other documents like, DSD, solution design document, test case, test scenarios, and all of those things. And toward the end of the session, I'll be discussing about the best practices that need to be followed during the designing of this documentation and during the creation and the development of the pod. So those are the agenda for today's session, right? So let's quickly start with our first topic, which is process automation lifecycle, right? And I am pretty much confident that most of you have gone through a course in your college. If you are from IT and computer background, it's software development lifecycle. And there is a very famous topic called waterfall model, right? So I'll start from the waterfall model just to explain how it is in compared to the waterfall model, right? So if you remember it, waterfall model have different steps, right? In fact, it has got 7 stages, right? In those 7 stages, we talk about the planning, how we should build a software, right? And then we also talk about the capturing of a requirement. Then we talk about the architecture design of a software that we are going to build, right? And then we talk about creating test cases, test scenarios, and a lot of other documentation in around how the software has to be tested. And then deployment happens and the maintenance. So these are the 7 stages of the waterfall model, right? Now, if you look at the RPA lifecycle, it looks pretty same or similar to what we have in a software development lifecycle. The only difference between the software development lifecycle and RPA lifecycle is here we are talking about building a bot or building a robot. We're not talking about a software product, right? So the definitions of planning, the definitions of the requirement, the definitions of design and the development change accordingly, right? But apart from that, the outcome and the key activities or the core activities of all of these stages will be very similar that what you see in other software development lifecycle. And some of you might ask that waterfall model is it's an old model, right? People are following agile today. People are following a spiral model, right? Why we are talking about waterfall and comparing it with, RPA lifecycle. So I'll tell you the, whatever the change that has happened in the industry, it is based on the feedback of the processes or the life cycle that we have, right? So if you look at the current, RPA life cycle, at the end, we have a constant improvement, right? And constant improvement is one thing that is driving this agile and spiral model, right? So in the agile or spiral model, what we do is at the end of each, sprint or an agile cycle, we give some feedback and that need to be incorporated into design and development. And similarly, same thing happens for the spiral model. So let's not talk about agile and spiral as of now. Let's talk about what and how we do into the RPA lifecycle, right? So the first stage here we have for the RPA lifecycle is a prepare RPA, all right? So prepare RPA talks about calculating and understanding the automation complexity and in-scope processes, right? So say, for example, you are working in an organization, right? And your organization has submitted a lot of automations ideas. Say, for example, 40 automations idea are there, right? All of those automation ideas cannot be converted into RPA design or RPA bot, right? Some of them are feasible, some of them are not feasible, some of these cannot be automated due to security concern. Some of those can be automated, but require, a lot of effort to build that, right? And the return on the investment to building those bots are much higher, right? So in the prepare RPA phase, what we do is we calculate a couple of things, right? One is what will be the expected ROI from this bot if we're going to build it? Are we be able to automate this bot or not, right? And if we are able to automate this bot, what should be the complexity of this bot? And then we'll also map the automation benefits, right? So what kind of benefits we'll get if we automate this process? So these are basically, high level things that we do in a prepare RPA. In the next slide, I'll showcase you who will be responsible for what, right? There will be a team of RPA, which consists of the BA, which consists of the solution architect, which consists of program manager. So different people will be responsible for different stuffs, right? So for now, who will be doing what? Let's forget that. But what are steps that we follow in that particular steps? Let's focus on that, right? So in prepare RPA, we calculate automation complexity, expected ROI, and then automation benefits. Once that is in, that means we are good to start for the RPA automation, right? But straight away, we won't go to the development. We won't start UiPath Studio and start building the bot, right? Before doing the automation, you need to document it. And documentation is really, really important, because most of the time, what happens is we look, the process through the videos, or we talk to the business SME to understand what they want to automate. We see their steps through, on the meeting, and then we forget to document the steps. If something goes wrong, what needs to be done, right? We only talk about the happy path. If you click here, if you go on this page, and if you download the invoice, these things will happen. But you don't, document the steps, right? If invoice is not there, what could happen? So step capturing and making them in a, appropriate diagram and flow is really, really important. And during the solution design phase, in generally, RPA BA would be responsible for designing a PDD. But as a RPA developer, you need to work with the RPA BA to understand how this process has to be designed. It will contain everything for the process that need to be automated. When I say everything, that means it's like a Bible, right? For every steps that you need to follow while designing a bot, right? So that's about the solution design phase. So outcome of this phase would be PDD. Then next, we move to the build RPA. Build RPA is a one phase. When you talk about the RPA development is a build RPA. Here, the actual coding and designing of workflow happens, right? So based on the requirement that you have received from the BA in a forms of the PDD, and then you work with a solution architect to design, architecture design of a bot, how it needs to be built. You start building a bot, right? You create workflow, and then you also update the PDD if there are some changes or some questions are there. Okay, so a lot of things happens there. The concept remains same, is you have to build the workflow, and the workflow has to be followed by the guidelines that is set up by your RPA governance model or RPA COE, right? Once the building of bot is completed, we'll move to the next phase, which is testing of RPA, testing of a bot, right? Testing can be, unit testing. That means you are testing workflow by workflow inside your UiPath Studio, or you are running the entire bot, which is integration testing. And then it could be moved to a different environment in a UAT, where the business user will come and see that how the bot is running by providing a different set of data. So that's a UAT. So testing, unit test cases, system integration test cases, or integration test cases, and user acceptance test cases, all are part of the test RPA. And inside the test RPA phase, we build test-based scenarios. BA will be helping out you to give a different set of data so that your workflow could be tested on the different data inputs, right? And then once you found out that it is working as expected, you'll move this bot into the production. So that's where the next phase is. Next phase is stabilize RPA, right? So stabilization of RPA is basically talk about once you have implemented the bot is running into production, right? However, carefully you design a bot, there are chances that bot will fail due to some data issue, or maybe some change into the system, or maybe some change into user access, or those kind of things happen into day-to-day production life, right? So it's a continuous way of improving and stabilizing your RPA production bot, right? So what you do there, you basically create an operational handover book. Most of the organization I have seen, there are different teams, right? RPA support and RPA developer team, right? So RPA developer team will be responsible till managing the concept till testing of RPA. And then the RPA support team will be responsible for stabilizing the RPA and constant improvement, right? But there are scenarios where RPA developer will be responsible for everything, right? So the core idea here is you need to update your documentation based on the exceptions or based on the failure scenario that you receive into the production, so that you should be able to stabilize the RPA. Bot is not built, bot is rebuilt, right? When you deploy bot first time into the production, it will run, but it may also fail for a couple of scenarios. And for those scenarios, you need to improve this. And those improvements will only happen if you document it, right? And that's what will become input for the next phase, which is constant improvement. I have seen a couple of RPA COE where they have built 100 of bots, right? And out of 100 bots, some of the bots are, they are running into the production environment, but they're not giving any desired result, right? I have an example where a bot is supposed to create 100 invoices, right? But when it is running into production, instead of creating 100 invoice, it's making 80 queue items as a failure, right? That means the performance of that bot has deteriorated from the time when it is deployed into production, right? That means you need to set up a framework where you need to monitor your bot constantly to understand if bot is working perfectly in a way it should or not. If it is not, it's a time to retire the bot, right? Or if it is time to improve the bot. So those things will be taken care in the constant improvement part, right? So if you have any questions on this, particular slide, keep posting that into the chat. We'll help you to answer, at the end of the session as well, right? So let's quickly move to the next slide, and there I'll talk about who will be responsible for what. And this is really, really important to understand the landscape of RPA team, right? So it also based on, a different setup of the organization, right? But the roles and responsibility will remain same. There might be a case that a RPA developer is also, considering his task as a RPA BA, right? So in those cases, the task that is listed on this slide will be done by the RPA developer only. But let's quickly look from the different stages, what all documentation need to be prepared, right? So if you look at the top, right, there are 6 stages, right? And in those 6 stages, there are checkpoints, right? So after every stage, there is a checkpoint. That means something has to be achieved before it need to be moved to a next phase, right? And then if you look at this particular, PPT, there are different people, right, who are responsible for different set of actions, right? So in prepare RPA, as I talked about, we calculate the ROI, expected ROI, right? We talk about how many processes need to be automated. We talk about, if we can automate the process or not, right? Those kind of things will be discussed in a prepare RPA phase. And what all folks will be responsible for those is we have a business analyst who will be responsible for maintaining the inventory of the processes those need to be automated, right? He'll be calculating, assessment for all of those processes, and he'll give a scoring on the basis of certain criteria that, right, out of these 40 processes, only 10 can be automated and 10 cannot be automated. Or if we have enough bandwidth and resources, we should be also able to automate 20 bots. So those discussions happens with the help of BA discussing with the business and the implementation PM manager, right? So that's basically, these are the 4 main folks in the initial stage of the prepare RPA, right? UiPath has also given a wonderful tool called UiPath Automation Hub. So you should be also able to capture inventory of the processes there also, or or you can follow your old method of doing it, which is on conference page or in an Excel file, and from there you should be able to take it. So the outcome of the first stage, prioritize pipeline, and it should have defined business benefit. Those has to be signed off by the business before we can move to the next phase, right? You need to have a concrete idea about, if we do automation, what benefit we are going to get. Otherwise, the problem will happen. You will spend 3 months of a time, and by the time you reach into production, business owner will come and say, I don't need this bot, right? So those kind of scenario will also happen. So it's really, really important to have the artifact signed off and then move to the next phase, right? Let's talk about the next phase, which is solution design phase. So what all things will be happening in a solution design phase, right? I talked about we need to create a PDD, right? PDD is a single source truth for all the information that is required for development of a bot. And business analyst will be responsible for creating a PDD, right? And he'll be also responsible to get it signed off from the business users and the process SME, right? He'll also work with, testing team to create a test case scenarios, right? So these are the, responsibilities of business analyst. And if you look at some other, blocks there in the second vertical, second column, IT people are also involved, right? Because you need to have, security and infra review. You need to also have to be, test environment to be prepared. Access has to be given, right? And then the first role of the RPA developer, right, would be creating a DSD and solution design document. And how he'll create it, I'll explain you in the next few slides. But RPA developer need to work with the solution architects, because you need to follow the best practices and guideline that has been set up by the enterprise, right, or your company. And solution architect, business analyst, and RPA developer will work together to give the demo of the PDD to the RPA developer. And then RPA developer will start creating a DSD and SDD. And then that has to be reviewed, signed off by the solution architect. And all of those things will be captured and signed off before we move to the next phase. So the outcome of solution design phase would be signed off PDD and draft DSD and draft SDD, right? And then we move to the build RPA phase. So in the build RPA phase, RPA developer will be responsible for designing a bot. He'll be looking at the content of DSD and SDD, and he'll start building the bot. The one thing that he need to consider here is his solution should be such a way that it is reusable. It can be extended, right? And it can be reused if required in a different project. So you need to follow all of those best practices. So I'll talk about the best practices at the end of this session, right? But at the same time, you are also responsible for preparing a test data for testing a bot, right? And then you need to validate those test data. And if there are any change in a test data or the requirement, you need to validate with the business analyst team. When you are building a bot, it's your also a responsibility to work with the IT team to get UAT environment ready, so that you should be able to test a bot when it moves to the UAT, right? So the artifacts that we need to create during the build RPA phase is DSD, which is design specification document. SDD is a solution design document. Test case, which is test scenarios and unit test cases. And then, all of these will be captured and signed off, right? So I'll showcase you the template of DSD, SDD, and PDD in next few slides, right? So we'll cover those points. Okay, let's move to the test RPA, which is the next phase of the RPA lifecycle. So far, what we have list of the processes that need to be automated. We have a document called PDD, which contains what we need to automate, right? Which contains list of everything that need to be taken care while the development and design. Then we have a solution design document, which talk about the technical way of implementing a solution. PDD is talking about the functional requirement. It's from the business perspective, right? And SDD and DSD is from a technical perspective. How you are designing a bot. Are you using a RE framework? Are you getting a data from API? Are you getting a data from queues? Those kind of information will be DSD. So we'll have DSD till here. Now in this page, we have also created the unit test cases and the test scenario. Those test scenarios and test cases need to be validated with the help of business user. It's really, really important to get the business sign off using the test cases data. I have seen a lot of people, building a bot in a studio and then publishing into the orchestrator into production And when the bot runs into production, it fails because they have never tested the bot on a different data set. And when new data set comes, production bot fails, right? So it's really, really important to think for all of the scenarios, what different data, can come during the bot development, right? So with this, your test RPA workflow will be calculated. Okay. Moving to the next page, just 1 second. All right. So the process and owner is nothing but a process, client. So we are describing, as a business on this particular slide. Okay. So once we have test RPA, next phase is to stabilize, and that I have already talked about, because once bot move into the production, we need to talk about how we can move a bot into production. So we need to create a release notes, we need to create an implementation plan, we need to work with a solution architect to create new accesses for the bot, prepare a new machine, and a lot of other stuff, right? So the outcome of a stabilized RPA will be the bot running into the production. And input for this particular stage would be release notes, handover guides, and those things, right? And then in the last, obviously the last step of the process automation is a constant improvement, right? And in the constant improvement, again, we talk about how my bot is performing, right? So you look at some of the data from the production run. You will look at the logs, how many items have been processed by the bot, right? You will look at, different KPIs, how my bot is performing, whether it is performing right set of steps or it is failing to do certain steps, right? Those validations will happen, right? Sometimes it happens is, you have automated a process, which is, facilitating audit requirement, right? And the audit requirement got changed because the business has requested for a different set of process to be done into the different department, right? So a lot of consideration has to be taken care by the constant improvement. It requires some monitoring. It requires a benefit tracking by the process owner, which is nothing but the person who is owning that particular process, right? And then BA plus implementation team or implementation manager and a PM work together to discuss that, do we need to keep this bot running into production, or do we require some changes, right? Or do we need to shut down this bot and retire it? So all those discussions will happen here, right? All right. So if you have any questions on this particular slide, feel free to post in a chat. In next slide, I'll showcase you how you should be able to work using a task capture. And the task capture, I'll be designing a PDD, a live PDD document, and there you will understand what PDD is all about. Is it a blueprint, or is it a Bible, or is it software design document, or what you can call it, right? So people call it with a different name, right? So let's quickly stop sharing my screen and go to the task capture tool. All right. So let me know once you are able to see my screen, and I'll quickly bring up UiPath task capture tool. And installer for this tool, you can download it from the UiPath community. So if you go to the UiPath community site, and there is a resources page, on the resource page, you should be able to download it and install it. And if you have a community license, so you don't need an additional license, it will automatically take care from UiPath Studio. You don't need to worry about it. So the moment you open a task capture tool, right, it will come like this. So here what I'm going to do, okay, here I am going to capture the steps that I'm going to automate using the RPA bot, right? And for this, what I'll do, I'll showcase you the steps that I'm going to follow, right? So there is a, let's take an example of this process. So we are talking about a process called invoice creation, right? And what this process is all about, the process is going to this particular website. It will navigate to the invoices system. It will click on a new invoice. There is a data into the Excel file, right? That need to be read. And based on the data, it need to input the data on the web portal. And once the invoices are created, it need to be downloaded and send over the email. So this is a particular invoice creation process. I'm just, taking an example, right? So you should be able to do anything. I'm just taking this example to showcase you how the task capture can be used to capture the step of a process that need to be automated, right? And this task capture tool is used to create a PDD. It will be mostly used by the business analyst, but it will be also used by the developers, because in many organizations I have seen RPA developer is also working as a RPA BA, as an individual contributor. So he's responsible not only for designing a bot, but he's also responsible for capturing the requirement from the client, right? So those folks who are having a mixed role or an individual contributor, they really need to understand the working of the task capture tool. Okay. So the first thing that I need to do is, as I shown you, so you need to click on the new document. Okay. And then you need to click capture process, right? So the moment you create a capture process, it will start tracking all the activities on your machine, right? It will capture every keyboard activity or every key that you press, right? It will also capture every mouse click that you do into your machine. It will capture and record everything, right? So let's quickly start the capture process. Okay. And then this small widget will come, and then you need to start capture. And when capturing is on, what you can do, you can bring the, website that need to be done. So as I'm moving here, so basically what I'm trying to do here, let me pause it because I need to open this first and then I'll start. So this is the RP challenge that I'm trying to solve it. And this is on my blog. Okay. So now for what I need to do, I need to capture the steps for my process to be automated, because I want to design a PDD before the development has to start, right? So I'll move this on a different page. I'll click resume so that it starts capturing it. And now everything that I'll do here, it will be captured by the task capture tool in the background. Okay. Okay. Now I need to go to the invoicing system. I'll click on add invoices. Okay. And from the add invoices, what we can do is we have a data here in an Excel file. So I'll bring that Excel file. So we have this data. Okay. And using this data, I need to create an invoice. So I'll simply move this Excel file to different screen just to showcase you what exactly I am doing, right? So I need to select a customer name. I'll select the customer name. Okay. So everything will be populated. For the invoice name, I have given INV001. Billing date, let's take a billing date as of today. Due date should be T plus 45. So let's put it 15th August. Status should be, say, unpaid. And here I'm putting the detail of product. So I'm putting a detail of product. Okay. And quantity I'm putting as a 5. And price I'm putting as whatever given in a, the Excel file. I am applying 18% GST. Okay. And I'm giving 250 rupees as a discount. I'm putting NA as a payment term, and I'm saving the invoice. So invoice has been saved, right? And once the invoice has been saved, you can, search that invoice. So I have created whatever I have created using the name, or you can simply, because this will give you the steps, right? So let's take a, I need to capture the steps. So I can download this particular invoice by clicking on this button. Okay. This will be created and then download. Okay. And then I'll save this invoice as INV1. I'm putting it on desktop just for the sake of name. Okay. And then I'm opening this. This invoice is downloaded. And now I'm copying the email from here. Okay. So Outlook will, okay. And now I'm attaching this file and then sending this. So this is my complete steps of a process, right? Now I'll bring this and stop it. Okay. So now you can see, I'll close this window just to make sure. So if you see here, a lot of steps has been, captured. Forget about these one, because so all the steps of the process has been captured here, right? If you look at where I need to go, I need to log in, right? I'm capturing from the Excel because it's a during a meeting. So I was, so we should be able to remove those which are not required. But if you look at here, it's captured every steps that you need to automate, right? And if you click on this will become as on a full screen, right? So look here, what I'm doing here, I'm clicking here, and then I'll be doing next. I'll be selecting a calendar. Date will be typed, moving to the next, right? So step by steps, right, is being recorded here, right? The idea here is to showcase you how you should be able to capture the process. And once you capture it, right, you should be able to, give a meaningful name, right? Say, for example, this step is inputting a status. So you can say update status, right? And you can write your comments or whatever you want to do, right? And once you go back to the diagram, here you have also opportunity to put a conditional statement and capture the new workflow, right? This is a happy part, right? If everything goes well, this has to be linear. But if something goes wrong, it has to follow a different path. So you should be also able to put the decision boxes here. And then you should be able to capture the steps for that, right? So you can try out, how this capturing works and all those things. My main motto here is to explain you how you should be able to use the task capture tool. Okay, right? And now I'm going to showcase you by using this task capture tool, how you should be able to create a PDD in the click of a one button, right? So for this, what you need to do is you need to go on a file, click on export, and click on Word document. Okay, and now I'll say the invoice process. Okay, and I'll simply say this one. I'll select a PDD template, which is this one, and export it. And I'll put it in our desktop. Sorry, on desktop. Okay. And your PDD has been created. Okay. So this is the beauty of this task capture tool. Otherwise, in traditional, RPA world, when this task capture tool is not there, how we used to capture a requirement. So we go in a meeting with a business user, right? Business user will share his screen and you will record that session. And once you come back to your desk, you will start listening that session and capture the images and put into the PD diagram, right? But if you miss something, that will be missed into the requirement gathering, right? So it's, it's giving you a lot of, easy way to doing the same stuff without making any error, right? So let me quickly open the PDD file. So you can see that this PDD file, I'll close this, okay, and make it more. And the view, you should be able to see that it has calculated and captured all the steps. So let's look at from here, the process statics. Okay, so it had captured this process contains this many windows, this many action has to be done, this many mouse clicks, this many key press, this many text entries, this many hotkeys are used, and total time to complete one invoice is 2 minutes 42 seconds. Because it's also calculating the login time, and then I have some issues while you're navigating between different windows. It's also talk about on which screen how many clicks are required and all those kind of things, right? And then beauty is here. It takes care of every single click that you have performed on your machine. And it has captured it beautifully by accurately depicting where the mouse has been clicked, what action has been taken, right? So this one, I have clicked on, Windows bar. I clicked on this, website. I clicked on Chrome, right? I moved this, small zoom icon, which is not necessary for this process. So you should be able to delete it, but it just for the showcase purpose, right? So you can see all the details are accurately captured using Control C, Control V, and a lot of things. So let's go to the invoicing steps, right? So here in the invoicing steps, you can see selected the user, right? Which user has been selected. Then if you have done a keyboard input, you have pressed tab, all those informations are captured accurately. And this is really, really good for a BA or a person who want to admire to become as a BA, or an RP developer who want to work as an individual contributor performing everything, right? Right. So you should give a try with this tool, and you should be able to understand the working of this tool more in a much better. And based on the time constraint I have, because I need to cover a lot of other stuff, I won't be able to guide you and help you through each of the menu item, right? But you can download it from UiPath community, try your hands, and if you have questions, please feel free to reach out to us. We should be able to help you, right? All right. So this is this one. And now I'm going to show you another beauty of this tool, right? And you will love that too. So how about if I tell this will also generate the workflow that you intend to design, right? So if you go to the file here, so I need to click on this one and export and UiPath Studio XAML file. And I will be using a modern activities because I have UiPath 22.4. And then I'll put it on desktop. Okay, and now I'll open a file, which will open up with my UiPath Studio. UiPath Studio is coming up in the background. So this is trying to create a workflow based on all the steps that I have performed, right? So it's basically giving me a skeleton, right? It's not a very, good designed bot because, business exceptions, try and catch block, log error messages, and those things you need to put into. But this will be really useful to help start with initial workflow design, right? It will tell you how your bot design would look like. So you can look at this has created nicely flow chart, use application scope, and then if you go to this particular, and then you will see that's what it is doing, right? And perfect. So this is really, really good tool, and it saves a lot of time when you do POCs, especially, right? So say, for example, your business manager has come and asked, can you automate this application, right? So you can say, let me give a try. What steps you need to follow? So he'll give you the steps over the email, and you go back on your desk, and while navigating through the application, and task capture tool is running in the background, you are ready with your workflow, right? And you can run this too, right? You can run this, and then it will run. Only thing that you need to take care is, if you are using, the password or URL and those things. So you need to minor modify this, source code that is generated from the task capture tool, right? All right, pretty much good with the task capture tool. So we move to the next, right? So let me minimize this. Let me come out of this task capture tool. I do not want to save it. So I'll close the task capture. I'll close this as well. And I'll go back to my presentation. All right. So we are done with this, task capture tool. And we have talked about the PDD that was created during the task capture export, right? So what will be the content of the PDD that we need to discuss? And we really need to understand what all informations we need to record there. PDD is really, really good and important document. If you do not create DST, that's okay. If you do not create HDD, that's okay. But at least you should create a PDD, because PDD is a binding between you and business users saying that this is the process that need to be automated, and you people has captured required steps that need to be automated accurately using the detail as is process map and also to be process map, right? So the content of the PDD is what is the purpose of document, what is the objective of the automation that you are building, who will be the key contact persons for this particular bot, right? What will be the minimum prerequisite for this automation? Say, for example, of tech invoicing processes that I have captured in previous example. I need access to invoicing system. I need an Outlook application to be installed on a bot machine. I need Excel application to be installed on a bot machine. So those all kind of minimum prerequisites has to be captured, right? And then we talk about as-is process description. As-is and to be is really, really important. And if you go in any interview for RPA, people will ask questions based on this. What is as-is? What is to be? What is the difference between as-is and to be, right? So let me describe you what is the difference between as-is and to be, and I will talk about what as-is and how you can create a to be. Okay. So as-is process is nothing but, how the person is doing the same steps without bot today into the production environment. So that's a as-is or a current state, you could say. So you'll talk about what is the process overview, how many applications are used, what are the steps that the person need to follow during the completion of a task, and then there should be L4 or L3 guide, right? Usually operation team have L3 or L4 guide, which talks about the visual diagrams, what need to be done on which screen. So you can use that diagram if it is already present. If it is not there, you need to create a new, because that's way you should be able to showcase what is the current state versus what is the future state. And if you are not able to, clearly articulate what the benefit I am going to give after, automation of bot, that will be a really challenging. So that's the reason we need to clearly articulate as-is process and to be process description. Other, important point that you need to consider is all the steps that a person is doing cannot be automated. Sometimes you need to bring a human in the loop, right? So you need to clearly also define what is the in scope for the RPA, what bot can do and what bot cannot do, right? So in scope for the RPA need to be listed in a section called in scope for the RPA, and out scope for the bot, which cannot be done by a bot, or a human person has to approve something, or he need to reply on the email, or he need to go to a different XYZ system which require a thumbprint. So those kinds of steps need to be clearly articulated into the out of scope for the RPA. And then the process documentation is not all about the happy path. Happy path is all good. The process is running, and it's completing steps, all are happy, right? But we also need to consider what kind of exceptions or what kinds of application error could happen during the design of a bot, or when the process is being completed by a bot, not by a human, right? Human can perform a lot of many things, right? If Chrome is not, responding, he can click the Chrome and restart the Chrome, right? But for you to design the same step, you need to list that as a application error exception, saying that Chrome not responding, retry this particular workflow. And then one more thing that you need to also consider in a PDD is reporting point, right? That's really, really important. You have designed a bot today, and after 6 months, a business SME will come or a process owner will come and say, I do not see any benefit that bot is doing. I am not going to pay for the development next year. Please just stop this bot, right? So in those times, what you need to do is you need to pull out a report, right, based on the logs that your bot is generating or based on the KPI that your bot is creating, right? So you should also consider creating a status report, in your bot design, so that you should be able to throw them to the business owner or somebody whosoever ask it that, look, my bot is expected to perform these many steps and it's doing exactly the same. If there's a change in a process, do let me know. We should be able to upgrade the bot, right? So these are the few things that you need to consider. And if you consider all of these things, especially the business exception handling, application error and exception handling, you are good to go. And make sure you document everything. When I say everything, that means every single click of a button has to be documented, right? So you have to be very careful, while designing a PDD, and get a sign off from the business user before start of a development. Because I have seen a lot of time when the PDD has been signed off, and after 7 days, a business owner will come and say, look, there are, you are automating this step, but there is a person who having special privileges. And whenever the request come from that person, we don't need to follow XYZ step. We can directly go to, A step, right? That's exceptional case. That exceptional case need to be also documented in the PDD, because if you don't document it, you won't design it. And if you don't design it, that means process, if there are 5 cases and 1 case is for that particular person, your bot is performing on 80%, not on 100%, right? So you have to be very careful while designing a PDD. All right, so let's talk about what all other documents that we create during the RPA lifecycle. Enough of being said about the PDD, right? PDD is one of the important document, but we have a lot of other documents that we need to, discuss. So PDD is all about what is being automated, right? Then we have SDD and DSD, which talks about how it has to be automated, how part, right? What all things we need to use. Are we using a Java application or are we using a mainframe application? If mainframe application, which terminal need to be used? If it is an API based application, what is the API authentication mechanism? If we are using a queue where we need to store a data, can we store the file in the queue, or we should store a file into a folder location and the file path has to be stored in a queue? Those kind of informations will go into the SDD and DSD. I'll showcase you one example, after this slide is being completed. So you should be able to understand how they look like. Then we have test scenario, which basically talks about how the bot has to be tested, right? And then we have a release note. Release note is nothing but how bot has to be deployed into the production environment. So you list and document all the steps, creating of a robot, creating of a machine, how the password has to be saved, where the config file path will be, where the log file path will be, what access will be this user have, and those kind of things will go into the release note. And then the really important document is operational handover guide. I have seen a lot of people and a lot of organizations are not creating at all, which is operational handover guide. So once you develop a bot and you hand it over to a support guy, support person need to monitor this bot into production environment. And there are scenarios, right? Say, for example, a bad data comes in on a Monday morning, right? So you should articulate a way, if there is a one bad item in 100 items, how you should be able to skip that particular bad item and the bot should continue, right? What if there is a highly, important or priority ticket that has come, which has not been, taken care by the bot? So those all detail need to be handed over and documented in the operation handbook guide, right? So let me stop the, the presentation again, and I'll showcase you the DSD and STD, and then I'll move to the next part of this session. All right, so I'll stop my session, and I have this folder, which I'm going to share with all of you guys. So this contains list of all the documents. Those need to be used during the RPA development lifecycle. And just to highlight, every organization is not using these. Some of the organizations are using some of these documents, but they have their own template and all those things. But the most important are PDD, DSD, and SDD, and then the test case and test scenario based template. So let's me quickly open the SDD first and then DSD. Okay. So this is a solution design document, right? The purpose of this document, again, let me click on the view, sorry. And navigation pan. Okay. So if you look at the highlights on the left hand side, you will see what we are talking here is the purpose of this document is how you are designing this bot so that we are making sure that we are following the best practices and the guideline set up by the RPA COET. How we should be able to scale a bot. Say, for example, if bot is running and producing 200 invoices per day, how we should be able to scale this bot to complete 1,000 invoices in a day, right? What will be the efficiency of bot? Is bot efficiency is good? Whether a person which is completing this task in 1 minute and now bot is taking 3 minutes, that means efficiency is not that great. So you need to consider scalability, efficiency, replicability, reusability of the component and those things while designing the SDD. Some people will say SDD and DSD talk about the same step, right? In SDD, we talk about the major component, how the bot is to be automated, what is details of input data, what will be the expected output, is orchestrator is used, what is the password policy, where the password are stored, where the share folder location is, when the bot is running, what is the schedule time for the bot, and a lot of other steps. So you should be able to look at those details, right? If you look at this template, you should be able to understand this. The difference, the major difference between DSD and SDD is pretty simple. SDD talk more from architecture of a design perspective, and DSD talks about low level guide of how that particular project is, how low level the process is being automated, right? So there are certain concepts, and this so I have seen a lot of organization is using only SDD, not DSD, because a lot of components are common, right? How you can do is, if you look at the difference, the major difference here is debugging tips and post UAT specifications. So DSD talks about how you should be able to debug your code, right? How a developer should be able to set up this code in his own machine, right? Say, for example, if he has left the organization and new developer joins, right? He should have some idea how the bot need to be set up, right? So for that purpose, DSD is useful. And SDD talks about on a high level steps only. It do not includes about individual workflow, design and steps. And that's the reason I have seen people not creating DSD. They usually create a conference page and there they step how a bot need to be configured and rerun, right? But it all depends on your RPA governance forum, and you can raise this and you can follow the best practices. But in my viewpoint, you should at least create SDD, if not DSD. Okay, I think difference is clear to everyone. Okay, so let's move to the other document that we create, which is test case and test scenario based template. So test case and test scenario is again the same thing. Test scenario is a bigger entity and test case is an individual entity. So in test scenarios, we type about the business user use case, right? Business user use cases, right? How a particular item has to be tested from start to end. That's a business scenario. And individual components of that business scenario will be test cases. So let's look at the test scenario template. Okay. And let's talk about the process. So login is a scenario. Login, bot is able to log in, right? That's a one scenario. Okay. But for login, it need to follow different steps. It should be able to launch a Chrome. It should be able to get a password from the orchestrator. It should be able to click on forget password if password got expired. It should be able to send the email, when the forget password option is not working. So those are the low level detail of this login functionality, right? So login performed by bot is a scenario, right? But individual steps of that particular login is a test cases, right? So You should be able to see the difference here. Right? So you can use this template. The only thing that you need to note here is that you need to clearly identify and document what should be the input for this testing, what should be the expected outcome, and if that expected outcome is matching with your bot design. If it is matching with your bot design, that means your bot is performing well, right? Good here. Okay, so let me go back to the UiPath, the presentation again, and then we'll talk about the best practices and then about some other steps of the session. Okay, so let me go back to the presentation. All right, so now let's talk about the best practices. Okay, what are the best practices that we should follow while building a bot, right? And this is more from a developer perspective. We're talking about how your bot should be efficient in execution, and it should be able to effectively manage the error handling, and how you should be able to avoid the common errors. Okay, so that's what I'm trying to showcase you. Best practices is not something that you can build or you can learn in a one day. It requires practice while creating a different kind of workflow. So for different kind of applications, there are different kinds of best practices that need to be followed. Those are application specific, right? For Java-based application, you should follow these attribute rules, and for web-based application, you should follow these attributes rules. Those are application specific best practices. What I'm going to discuss today or explain you today is a best practices that is generic across all the applications type and what you should follow while building a bot. So that's my agenda is. And while doing so, I'll also introduce you another tool or another capability of UiPath Studio, which is called Workflow Analyzer. So how you should be able to configure the Workflow Analyzer and how you should be able to test that your bot is performing, all the best practices and guidelines set up by the RPA Solution Architect or RPA COE, right? So let's quickly move to the next slide and talk about the best practices. Okay, so I don't know why this pop-up was coming. So when we talk about the UiPath automation best practices, there will be a checklist given by your organization. Usually I have seen people has created an Excel file, and that Excel file contains a different set of check boxes which need to be checked by the RPA developer before they are submitting their code for the code review. This is the responsibility of an RPA solution architect to ascertain and test that the bot that you have built is following the best practices and guidelines. So here are two ways of doing it. One is a code review. Another one is using the workflow analyzer. So let's talk about first way of doing it by code review. So usually what will happen, the moment you publish a code in your Bitbucket or you are storing into some share folder location, and you ask your solution architect or your team lead to review it, he'll basically follow the checklist. Okay, so there will be a long list of the checklist that need to be checked in your design, like naming convention. Okay, your variable name should follow camel case, or your argument should contains in, out, and in out parameters. Your workflow should contains verb like get, put, out, print, those kind of things, right? So this is basically most used best practices that you should follow at least to start with, right? And then after, as you grow and as you become more experienced, you should follow a lot of other best practices that is given by the UiPath. So let me quickly cover all of these 9 one by one, and then I'll talk about the workflow analyzer. And I'll also give you a best practices guide given by the UiPath, and that's a huge guide. So which is more than 30 pages. So you won't be able to follow all of those guides, just by learning UiPath Studio in few days. It takes time. So as you grow, as you become experienced in UiPath, you will start following those. So let's talk about the first best practices that you should follow is a naming convention study. It's really, really important to follow the organization practice for the variable, argument, and workflow name. I'll tell you the reason, because today you are building this bot, right? And next time there is another developer who is assigned to support this bot, or maybe a bot which is built by a different RPA developer and it has come to you to support that bot, right? And one Monday morning, you identify that bot is not running. You are scratching your head, which variable is getting overwritten by which variable. You don't have any idea if you don't follow the naming convention, right? You have created a variable called in argument, but that argument is basically overwritten inside the workflow. So you don't have idea where that variable is getting overwritten and data is getting messed up. So naming convention is really, really good starting point. You should at least start with following the best practices, and you can follow the UiPath guide for that, how your naming should be. So I'll share that you after this session, so you can follow that. Then the second best practice is no hard-coded delays. No means no, a big no. You should not put any hard-coded delays. I have seen a lot of people. Let's take example. You are automating a process, right? And you are working on a legacy application. And in that legacy application, the moment you enter your username and password, after that it takes let's take 1 minute to load the next page. I have seen a lot of people has put the hard-coded delay of 1 minute, right? And what will happen if page will load in 1.5 minutes? Or what will happen if there is a network delay that day and page has loaded into 1.5 minutes? So that bot will fail. Most of the time, based on my experience, I'll tell you, these hard-coded delays is one of the major reason of failing a bot when navigating from one screen to another screen. So try avoid using that hard-coded delay. It will save a lot of time while the bot is running into production. Then the third point, configuration. Keep outside the code. Keep it outside the code. One line rule, keep it outside the code. Never put into data folder. The reason being, when you publish a package, the package will be published to orchestrator as a zip file called nugget, right? And if you keep config there, it will be really tough for you to change the values inside the config. And in enterprise environment, you don't have access to the production. So you are not allowed to go into the production box and change those values. So ideally, you should keep the configuration on a share folder location, and then you can request IT team to work with you to provide a temporary access so that you can change the configuration without impacting the bot code to be republished, right? So if configuration are outside of the bot code and bot code is different, then you are basically trying to avoid issues that might occur due to the configuration. Say, for example, the URL of application got changed, but everything remains same. Or a person whom you used to send the email for approval, say, for example, Rohit, right? You are sending an email to Rohit to approve the invoice process to be moved for the next step. And what if Rohit decided to move from UiPath, a new person joined in? So you need to change that email address. And if you keep inside a bot code, it will be a really, really trouble, right? So try to keep all the configuration item outside the bot code. So that's a number 3. Next is the credentials. Credentials is a really, really important nowadays. Due to the InfoSec team in the organization, they'll come after you if you try to hard code any password inside your workflow, right? And it will get detected, right? Trust me, it will get detected. I can give you my example when I was RPA developer and in workflow, when I was connecting a database, I have written, password as a comment in the workflow and it got detected, right? So, and then there are audit people. So they'll come and then, ask a lot of regions to explain why you have written a password in a plain text, right? So to save your organizations from audit and security perspective, always put your credentials inside a credential store, which is UiPath assets. Or if your organization is using any other tool like CyberArk or PMP or password manager, store password from there Store password into the window credential store and get the password from there. Never store password, even for the testing of the workflow, I have seen people, configured a workflow, and inside the argument, they have written a test credential, and they said that this is a test credential, we are testing it. When we move into the production, it will come from the argument and it will get overwritten. But again, that's a problem, because password is a plain text, which is a security breach, right? So you should not use the credential as a plain text. No means no. You should not use. Okay. Then let's talk about the reliable selector. And this is a really a big topic. This topic I cannot touch, in 5 minutes, right? Because different application has different kinds of selectors issues. SAP has their own challenges, right? Mainframe application has their own challenges. Web-based application has their dynamic content challenges, right? So what I'm trying to say here is, whenever you are building a selector, try to validate the selector multiple times and carefully select the attributes and the variables for that particular selector. Because sometimes it will happen, the web page that is being displayed on your machine will not exactly display on other machine due to the caching and lot of mechanism being used in a modern application. Facebook is, let's take example of Facebook. If you're trying to automate something on a Facebook, the rendering of web page of the Facebook is different for a different user based on, cookies, settings, preferences, language, location, right? So you have to be very careful when you are selecting the selector, especially if you are working on a applications which is available in a multiple geographies, multiple locations, multiple languages, right? And if you are working for an application which is not native in English, say for example, application is in a German or application is in a Hindi, right? So for those scenario, try to validate it multiple times using UiPath Explorer and carefully select the variables. Let's talk about the next point, which is UiPath synchronization. This is also really important point, and one of the really good thing that you should include in your workflow design is a UI synchronization. And this is very much related to the no hard-coded delays. If you want to avoid the no hard-coded delays, you should use the concept of UI synchronization. What I'm trying to say here is, in RPA, we are very much dependent on application response, right? So sometimes application page response may be 5 seconds. Sometimes application page response may be 10 seconds. Sometimes application may response should be 1 second because if there is no data, right? So you should build a mechanism inside your workflow to identify and validate if that particular item has appeared on the web page or that particular item appears on the web page before you can perform any click or any type into activity. So you should validate before performing any input activity, whether it is a click or type into. UI element could not be found is one of the most common failure issue in a bot development. And it happens mostly due to the UI synchronization, because you have not considered application delays, right? You have given a 2 seconds delay for a web page to change, but what if it takes 3 seconds into the production? So UI synchronization is a really good way. And how you can do it? So there are a lot of activities, element appear, element exist, find elements, those kind of activity can be used to perform the UI synchronization. So all you need to do is, before performing any input or type into activity, you try to check if the application is a correct state. For that, input action has to be taken. Okay. Now let's talk about the point number 7, input type. And this is one of the really good interview question, I'll tell you. And this is asked many times in a multiple ways, in a multiple example in UiPath certification. So a lot of questions comes also in a UiPath certification on input types. So there are basically 3 types of input types, and now being 4 in a modern or newer UiPath Studio, because Chromium is being added, right? So usually you have click activity, simulate click, send window messages, and then simulate. So these input types behave differently on the type of different application. So while you are typing something on application, you should try to tick different check boxes and see its behavior, right? Some of these types, like simulate click, do not work in a background. So if you want to, your automation to work while your application screen is minimized, you should experiment with different input type, because simulate click will not work, right? So all what I'm trying to say here is, whenever you are typing something, typing into some text field or clicking a checkbox, you should try different option of input types to validate how your application is behaving. And based on the application behavior and your requirements, say for example, if you want your application to work in a background, you should choose appropriate input types. And with UiPath 21.10, we have a new ways of input, which is Chromium, using the Chromium API. So you can also experiment with that, right? All right, so let's move to the next, the best practices, which is exception handling. And I think we have already talked about try, catch, throw, rethrow, and all those mechanisms. So I'm not going to talk about that. I'm going to talk about the concept of bubble. Okay, so and I think you have a session due for the UiPath RE framework that's basically takes care of bubbling up the exception from process page to main page, right? Because when you create a processes and when you deploy it on orchestrator, you will see even if your bot is failing, the status on UiPath orchestrator is not changing. It is saying success because you are not appropriately following the concept of bubble up, right? So if something, say for example, you want to create a workflow which contains 3 workflow, A, B, and C. A is calling B and B is calling C, right? So here is a parent and child relationship between A, B, C, right? So if something goes wrong into C, the exception that has been captured in a catch block of a C has to be thrown to the B, right? But here we cannot stop the process. It has to further bubble up on a main page, which is A, for bot to stop. So in the B, in the catch block, where the exception has been captured from the C, has to be thrown again to the main page, right? So this is called the concept of bubble up. And this is not really tough if you understand the concept of invoking a workflow. So all you need to do is all the child exception has to be handled properly and gracefully at the parent workflow. That's what I'm trying to say. Okay. And then the last one is use of workflow analyzer tool. Okay. So for this, I'm going to showcase you in a UiPath Studio. Okay. How you should be able to configure it and use it so that your code is following the best practices. So for this, I'll again stop the presentation. Okay. And I'll quickly go to the UiPath Studio. All right. So for this, what you need to do, let's open a template called RE framework. Okay. I'm creating a process from RE framework. Just give it any name, let it to be created. But my focus is to showcase you how workflow analyzer works. So workflow analyzer is a tool given by the UiPath Studio, which basically performs a static code analyzing to understand how beautifully or how badly you have written your code, right? So what you can do is, if you go to here, okay, and if you go to the design tab, okay, and if you click on the first, you need to open a file before invoking this one. And now if you go here and analyze the project, so it will showcase you all the best practices that has been followed and all the best practices that has not been followed. So here we don't have any error. But if you run this, you will see a lot of error in your workflow. I am 100% sure, because this is a RE framework. It is beautifully designed by the UiPath team, so they don't have any issues. But if you look at here, if you click on this, you will see a lot of these rules. There are a lot of these rules, right? And what it says is, basically, these codes are nothing but a rule, which is given by the UiPath. And if you click on this, it will open up a UiPath documentation page. Click on any of these rules, okay? And this will, tell you that this workflow, this rule is talking about this best practices. So there are a lot of best practices are there, and you should be able to configure all of these best practices from this particular page. Okay. So when solution architect will review your code, he will create, he'll look at this error list first, and he'll say you that, hey, look and go on your this page because you are not following this best practices. Okay. And you should be able to see the details of these things. So try, experimenting with this. Okay. And there is another, screen here. Here you should be able to configure for which rule, how your, project should behave. Say, for example, hard-coded timeouts, right? This is being shown as error. So if you put anything in your workflow as a hard-coded timeout, and when you analyze the project, error message will be same. And you should be able to change it from the error warning and info and purpose. In the enterprise, it is being governed by, automation ops tool, which basically deploy a governance policy for each developer. So it is being enforced by, enterprise-wide policy that you cannot publish your process unless you have no error. So how you can set those is, you can set those it from here. So here you should be able to set all of those values, and then in general, you should be able to, select those things, right? And also you should be able to set it globally from the settings tabs on design. And here you should select as enforce analyzer before run, enforce analyzer before publish. So if you do not follow the best practices, and if this tab is enabled, or if you do not follow the best practices, and if this tab is enabled, this will not allow you to publish, and this will not allow you to run the bot or even test it, right? So these settings can be changed from here. And then there is another tab, enforce analyzer before push and checking. So this basically take care of when you publish a code to GitHub or source control system. So there it will be taking care of this. So that's what I'm trying to explain you. So this is how you should follow the best practices. So try looking at the workflow analyzer rules, try to understand what you should avoid. And then there is a big documentation given by the UiPath, which I'll share with you guys to follow. So this is a 35-page documentation, which will talk about everything, right? So I have talking only about 6-7 points, but it talks about all those details, how you should name the argument, how you should name the activities, how you should create a process, how you should create assets into the orchestrator, how you should create a configuration file, what should go into the configuration, where you should store the credentials, and a lot of things. So it contains a long list of, like you should not design a workflow like this. Instead of, if there is more than 3, if try to put into different way like this. So those kind of things. Okay. So I'll share this, and I think with this, I'm good with, all the things that I need to cover. And then I have only one more thing that I need to talk here is assignment. All right. So before the assignment, I still have, we'll still have 5-6 minutes. I think we can take up few questions, right? Any questions, guys?
You can just post your questions on chat. I'm sure Manoj and Shubham have been hard at work to answer all the questions, but still, if there are any more questions, please do post. In case there were any questions which were not addressed, please do repost those on the chat and we will take it up.
An example on the workflow analyzer, I mean, it's tough. I mean, I can showcase you, but I don't have those things ready on my machine. So you can connect me offline. 22.4 is available. Yes, it is available. Okay, so Suresh is having a really good point. How peer code review is done in UiPath, right? So basically nowadays organization is moving on CI/CD pipelines, right? So peer code review is now not getting a lot of traction. So what we have done in in the most of the organization is we are using a pipeline using automation tools like Jenkins or Azure, where the workflow analyzer will be run on the code that is being delivered by a RPA developer. Say, for example, there are two persons working in a team, RPA developer 1 and RPA developer 2. And when they publish the code in a GitHub, the pipeline will trigger, and the pipeline will try to run the workflow analyzer on the code that has been given by the RPA developer 1. And the result of that will be shared over the email to a team lead and a solution architect. And then other RPA developer is being asked to work with him to get all those errors which has been listed by the workflow analyzer to get resolved. So that's how we do nowadays. Previously, it used to do by a person will be looking at the code workflow by workflow, activity by activity, but that's a really, really time-consuming process. I hope I'm able to answer your query, Suresh. All right, anyone else? Any other questions? We still have. Okay, so I'm taking up this question. A PDF is taking 5 minutes of total time by a human, the same by the bot. Do the RDF will suggest that what need to be corrected, like syntax, step level, and development flow model? All right, so when we are designing the PDD, we also talk about the benefits we are getting out of automations, right? So we also list down what are the benefits that we'll be getting once we complete the bot development. And if you have promised that, saying that after the automation, this process should take 2 minutes, but in actual, when the automation gets completed and move into production, it's still taking 5 minutes, right? Then it is a problem, right? So you need to set up a right set of expectations. You need to document that, look, boss, I cannot decrease the time what it used to take in a PDF, because that's the same step the bot need to be do. But other steps, which is after the PDF reading or before the PDF reading, those can be decreased, and the overall time for the process will be decreased. So those things you need to consider, and you should talk about, during the PDD sign-off processes when you give a demo to the business users. All right, I think good. So let me quickly open the assignment that need to be completed and shared on a social media network. So don't forget to share your learning on social media using the hashtag UiPath community and hashtag RPA Kickstarter and task capture. And do tag me if you need my feedback on how you have developed that or you want me to connect. So please feel free to tag me, feel free to tag Rohit and other folks we have. So let me quickly open the, I'll stop the presentation and open the assignment. So what you need to do, I'll just explain it. All right, so all you need to do is take a selfie of a process which is defined here, okay? And what you need to do is, so all you need to do is, you can open a browser, go to Google, navigate to image searches, type a keyword called Happy New Year 2022, or you can change it, make it configurable, open the image in extended mode, save the image on a desktop and rename it. So this is the step that you need to follow while task capture tool is running in the background on your machine. So first you need to install a task capture tool, and then you need to perform these steps, right? So you'll install a task capture, you'll create a selfie, and then from the export menu of the task capture tool, you need to export that as a document and then export as a XAML file. Try to run that XAML file to see if the automation that is being built by task capture tool is running or not. And if it is running, and if it is not running, how I should be able to make it run, what I should change, right? So that's you need to do. And then you can store it into any GitHub repository, and you can share the link. You can share it on, LinkedIn or any social media channel, right? So I don't know if I can share the files on this, chat. Is that possible to send a file? I don't know if we can.
Yes, you can send it on chat, or you can also just share it with me. I'll add it on that event page along with the recording.
Okay, that will be great, Rohit. So I'll share this because a lot of documents are there,
Sure.
and these are basically documents are available on UiPath Academy. But all what I have done is I have captured it from a different trainings and different courses. They are not available at one location, so it will helpful for you. Okay. All right, pretty much we are on time.
Awesome, perfect. Any last questions? I think there is a question from Nathan.
Okay, let me have a look. Nathan, you are asking about UiPath upgrade, right?
Nathan, you can unmute yourself as well.
If you want to talk, yeah, because there are a lot of questions, so I'm not able to understand what exactly you are trying to ask.
Right, Satish, that was a question.
All right. See, I'll not suggest you to go to on 22.4 because that's not FTS. You understand the concept of FTS and LTS? Full-time support and long-term support. So basically UiPath releases two release every year. Let's take example of this year. So there will be 22.4 and then 22.10, right? So 22.10 will be a long-term support. And for the organization, because the cost of upgrading a UiPath orchestrator and other associated tools, it requires a lot of effort. So usually we follow the release cycle of a long-term support. So say, for example, if your organization is on 19.10, you should try to go to 21.10 instead of going to 22.4. Or you should wait and then go to 22.10. Right? All right. Anyone else? I still 1 minute, one more questions I can take.
Any questions? Oh, sorry, my video is off. Thank you. Perfect. I think we are also perfectly on time, so we can conclude the session. Thank you so much, Satish, for your time. Thank you everyone for joining. I had also shared the link for tomorrow's session, so please make sure that you register for it, and you will get the details about the assignment and the recording as well as the presentation on the same event page where you registered for this session. So soon after, maybe in 2 hours or so, the recordings and everything will be published. So please do go there, and looking forward to see your completed assignments on social media. Please do tag Satish and myself on that. Manoj, Shubham, you there? Maybe you can just turn on your video. Perfect. Thank you guys. So yeah, thank you so much, Shubham, Manoj, for clearing all the queries on the chat real time, and making life much more easier for Satish at the end, so that he doesn't have to spend time on the questions. Thank you so much. Again, to all the participants, if you have any queries, please go to forum.uipath.com and post your queries and join us during the Mentor Connect sessions. And that is pretty much it. So have a great week, everyone. Thank you so much, Satish, Manoj, and Shubham as well.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Rohit.
Thank you, guys.
Bye.
Bye.